Brian Twining, the NASCAR season is in the books. Ryan Blaney is your NASCAR Cup champion.
Let's go.
Won the race. Did not win the race. Our old boy, the Watermelon
Man,
won the race. Blaney was second. Fun race. We'll recap it all today. Talk about DraftKings betting preview, and then we'll talk about kind of a season look back. We'll talk about some of our favorite races, some of our favorite events, how the cards went, and then obviously get into all the shenanigans and stuff as we head into next season. But let's get into it on today's Angle of Pursuit.
Ross Chastain used the wall all the way around this racetrack.
Logano has been the class of the field.
Check out the big brain on Brad.
Yeah, I need to change my underwear.
Brian Twining, Ross Chastain wins Phoenix. Ryan Blaney wins the championship. The season comes to an end. We started way back in February. This is kind of our look back at the season, recap everything that was. Let's talk about the race kind of in general. We definitely had discussions on our preview about Ross Chastain and potential excitement for him. He was obviously, we'll recap our DraftKings lineups, was a big part of both of those. We talked about how good he was here last year in the Final Four, obviously qualified horrendously, but was able to get to third. He had tons of speed. We talked about Blaney and his rocket ship or potential.
And I think the most important aspect that we hit on with Chastain was he had zero reason to pull over for any of the championship guys. He was there for himself, and that definitely proved true on Sunday when him and Mr. Blaney were kind of, two different ideas of what should have been happening. And, before we even go any further, I'll just say, as somebody who backed Ryan Blaney and somebody who also likes Ross Chastain, I don't think Chastain did anything wrong. These guys are paid by winning races. Doesn't matter if it's a championship race or not. And Blaney, for his credit, honestly, he almost gave it away by getting too upset with Ross and giving him that heavy bump. I thought for sure he maybe gave himself too much damage there, but luckily they didn't. But yeah, kudos to both of those guys, just racing really hard. And yeah, I'm excited to recap. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. Let's talk Ross because I think he's very interesting. Obviously, we've talked a lot about him as fans and as Ross supporters. Very excited about what his potential could be. Seemed to lose some of his luster after the discussion with Rick Hendrick and kind of that whole shenanigans. It seems like he found his cojones and he laid him right on the track. And was not willing, not afraid to race for a win, which, obviously, you don't want to be the guy who ruins the championship. But at the same time, you can go for a win, especially when you don't have a dog in the fight. Like Logano, it makes more sense, or Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman having two teammates. But Ross had nobody to contend with, and he wants to prove that he can still be a good driver. So that was amazing to see.
And I think too, it definitely put to rest any talk of we've said it on the show before of Chastain having his manhood clipped away by Rick Hendrick, and then just the talk that Ryan Blaney didn't have what it took to take a win or a championship, and both of those got dispelled this past Sunday, which to me is just an indication that next year we have a lot more drivers that are probably capable of winning a championship than we thought coming into this season.
Yeah, and we will be back between now and the Daytona 500 probably a few times to
for sure.
When odds drop, we'll be there. We'll recap some kind of season as we look forward. We'll get some friends on to kind of run through the odds and get their opinion. But it was interesting because obviously the Final Four was the youngest group of Final Four ever. We have a big young nucleus coming into the sport. Ty Gibbs, Rookie of the Year, was amazing, had a really good season. Even when things kind of faded in the middle, we're like, okay, well, maybe that's it. But then he kept showing fight. I think your Blaney point was perfect, because that it was one of his big things. Is there was a lot of like, well, when he needs to put his nose in there and really go get a win,
Yep.
he won't do it. And so he obviously showed on Sunday when the championship was on the line. He's going to make that happen. He's going to put his nose in there. He's going to bump Ross, even if it, and he has to learn a little bit too. Like,
Yeah.
how do I push without pushing too much? Where does the line? And I thought, oh, this might be more of a learning experience than a championship experience, but he was able to learn a little bit and still find a way to get it home at the end. So that was really, really impressive to see.
And he did it 2 races in a row, because you saw him at Martinsville. Like, he got extremely aggressive late in that race, even though he was fine just riding around because he was going to get in on points, but he wanted to go for that win, and he did it by driving into corners deeper than everybody else and getting uber aggressive. And then to the championship race, and I mean, on restarts, he was literally throwing his nose in there and basically telling people, get the F out of my way because I'm coming and I have the best car.
Yep. And back-to-back championships for Penske, obviously. And it was cool hearing Roger talk to him on the radio, being like, hey, guy, you have a rocket ship. Because he was complaining early. He was like,
man,
this thing sucks. I have no control. I have no grip.
I think all those guys do that, though. If we were listening,
fast lap. And it's like, dude, you have a rocket ship. I can't imagine what it feels like, because your car is obviously frustrating you, and you feel like, okay, well, I'm obviously losing time to all the rest of the field, and there's no way I can win the championship. And
and he was running, like you said, maybe a 10th slower than Chastain at the time for the second fastest car, and he's complaining that
the rest of the field. So that was cool to see. And these are all young guys; they're learning on the fly, and obviously, it was really cool to see Kevin Harvick go out. Obviously, emotional for him, seeing everybody come talk to him at the end, his kids riding on the car. Just like that little stuff is so cool. Obviously, it'll be interesting next year. And, we'll see kind of what that looks like. The other championship 4 drivers, Kyle Larson, he made it tough at the end. He made it look like there was gonna be maybe something, but he just didn't have it. The car was just
and gosh darn it, how the F did they wind up getting in front of Byron at the very end? At the very freaking end.
I don't know what was wrong. So Byron, I'm confused, because I had the lap times up on my laptop and I was watching. And it seemed like he was fast, but I don't know if he was just stuck or where he was in traffic, and like he had a little bit of a gap, so he was able to make up time. But yeah, he was just like, he was clearly the third car like most of the day. I thought he had a chance. I was still looking at his lap times. I live bet him, thinking maybe there's a chance that he finds a way to get to the front. And if there's anyone that I trust between good pit stops and restarts, it's Byron. He figures it out. He's done it multiple times this year. So I thought maybe there's a chance.
I actually added him too at 9-1 with, say it's like 40 or 50 to go. It was fairly close to the last caution that we had, because I thought, like, hey, if we get a caution here with that pit stall, like, and everybody's going to pit, who else is going to take more advantage than the 24 who has done it all season? So yeah, I added him live, which was like basically my first major win or championship exposure I had for him. So, it really didn't hurt me very much when looking back at all my Vegas bets.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it like before Martinsville. We said we really like Ryan Blaney. He was 10-1. I know a couple of listeners have reached out to us on Twitter. Really appreciate hearing all the feedback from you guys in terms of what we did right, what we did wrong, things you want to see. So, in the comments below on Twitter, if you want to have a conversation, Brian and I are very open to, updating the show so you guys can get the most out of it. But we've really appreciated all the good feedback we've gotten. And
yeah, and I'm at home working from my home office on Twitter a lot anyways for work. So like, you comment or you message us, like I'm always available. I'm more than willing and open to discuss NASCAR betting, where we sucked at picking, and just debating anything when it comes to that stuff. So
yeah, and that's going to definitely be a big part of our off season, of figuring out where we can get better, where we can get more consistent, because we did get directionally accurate, especially over the second half where I feel like we were going the right way. A lot of stuff wasn't necessarily coming up green for us, but that's going to be an issue with cars having issues and wheels coming off and all that stuff. But getting that Blaney 10-1 before Martinsville was really nice. Helps make Sunday a really, really nice day. And obviously him getting to victory lane for it in terms of the championship was really cool to see. The fourth guy, old Chris Bell. It's just
That sucked, man.
yeah, he never really had a chance, and it's frustrating. And obviously we've seen, it seems like in the past couple of years, there's always been like one car that was clearly
Yep.
not there. And he obviously blew a rotor. Very frustrating. I was starting to get real worried about Ryan Blaney because Cindric had an issue and Logano had an issue. And I was like, oh God, they're going to get him. But the one thing that seemed to be different is we talked about it, especially before, like pre All-Star break. Blaney was always having, whether it's a speeding issue or a pit issue or something stupid in stage 3, he avoided all that nonsense, and down the stretch they were great, and that's a big part of why he's the champion today.
Except for the one pit stop where I believe they lost like 4 spots.
Yeah, but he had such a good car that he could.
I still remember I was at the condo in Vegas and I was about to throw the beer bottle that I was drinking. Like, are you effing kidding me right now that this happens right now?
Because that's the thing. Even when you have a rocket ship and you're having a great day, you still, it's a team sport at the end of the day. You have to have your pit crew make good pit stops. You have to have your crew chief make good decisions.
And to like getting to see that up close and personal this last time in Vegas, we're talking fractions of seconds. And, you know, these guys' mistakes are things that we probably do every minute. You know, just the type of just walking, we make a mistake in the efficiency of our walking. And these guys are, you know, even a slow pit stop for them is faster than a group of us could do, you know, practicing for a year straight. So, yeah.
So that was the championship 4. Let's throw up our DraftKings lineups and we'll run through some of our bets and all that good stuff. And then obviously we'll talk more racing, and then we'll dive into some other thoughts. So on DraftKings, we debated it, and I'll pull up the other lineup here in a second. But you know, we talked, do we want to go Ryan Blaney 2? And we probably should have, because that was our guy.
Yeah.
But we did the Christopher Bell thing, and obviously no chance once he did that. Logano was a little underwhelming, if I'm being honest. Like,
yeah, he didn't do much.
He didn't even have a top 10 day, and I don't know if it's just like everything went to the Blaney car, and they were, I don't know. It was frustrating. Obviously, the Chastain play was the call of the century. That ended up being great. Chase Briscoe was my other underwhelming performer of the day.
Gosh.
He was just a non-factor. And after looking so good a week ago, and
Yep.
Harvick was solid, and Almirola was okay, and like the other SHR cars were fine. Like, it was really, really underwhelming. But you know, if we're gonna exclamate Chase Briscoe's season with underwhelming and underperformance,
Exactly.
it feels pretty fitting. So
yep. And it was it happened at the time when a bunch of people in the community had finally gotten back on board this weekend too.
Yep.
So
yep, he Lucy'd in the football dust. So
yeah.
Yeah, and if we had gone Bell, we would have been sitting 7th or 6th in the in this contest. Instead, I got 63rd and was outside. But we hit it over here. We had the lineup. It was so good. I thought I was going to take it down at one point. Only a few points off. Briscoe
Man,
was
so close.
Briscoe and Harrison Burton were probably the two, but Blaney was great. Byron was great. Chastain was great. Turns out getting 3 of the top like 5
right
is a way to do well. So, and then Byron obviously dominated early. So it was really nice to see. Really, really good. I feel like as building DraftKings lineups, we got so much better down the stretch. I felt like we were hitting some good some good lineups and building stuff the right way. So Michael McDowell, by the way,
Hey, Michael McDowell is a effing king, my
top 10
friend.
car, and shouts to Bovada for just reposting their early practice, their prior to practice and qualifying. We got him at 10-1.
If you don't follow me on Twitter, you probably want to add me for the beginning of the NASCAR season, because especially on weekends when I'm in Vegas, I'm up late shopping lines.
Yep.
Bovada dropped their odds for this race late Saturday evening, but they mistakenly dropped, I want to say the majority of their top 10 numbers were pre-practice and qualifying. McDowell was 20-1. Chastain was 2-1.
Yeah.
I had to basically ask for a larger allowance, or actually, I didn't even ask for it. I just did it and then explained afterwards, like, "Hey, I had to do this."
It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, Brian. That's what you.
Yeah, because like when those situations arise, you got to take advantage of it. And I was not going to allow somebody like Chastain, who we were both high on, post practice, to pass on those type of odds. I went really heavy on him on Bovada, and while I was in Vegas as well. So he paid off, and then
got
McDowell
Chastain against Kyle Busch at a posit plus number, which was
yeah.
I was messaging with Wormy, and I was like, what do you think about these? He said Chastain is going to be fast, and sure enough, we probably should have thrown a little bit on the outright, but
dude, I am so mad. I think he was 35-1 or something.
Yeah, there was definitely 40. Shouts to the community, by the way.
Oh yeah, there are some people.
Great Blaney tickets, some Chastain tickets. It was a great race for a lot of the betting community, so that was phenomenal to see.
Yes.
So overall, DraftKings was fun. I wish I had put Blaney in the other lineup. It could have been an even better day, but that's okay.
And just to continue down the DFS track here, like if you're not aware, Grid Rival, they started a contest pre season for NASCAR where you entered, and each week you picked 5 different matchups. They were their featured matchups, and at the end of the season, depending on where you finished in the rankings, you took home money. If you're looking for something next season, I'm hoping they do this again, but I definitely recommend it. It's pretty fun. There's a large chat room in there. It's not cheap, but at the same time, like, it just adds to your betting card, and it's basically like a future bet.
Yeah, it was like $75. I don't know, they might up it next year, but it's cool because it gives you something. So like if you've ever done one and dones or like pick'em pools or any of that kind of stuff, it's over the course of the whole year. So if you do it race by race, it's like $5 a race. It's not that bad.
And make sure you set reminders, because I probably had about 5 to 7 races where I completely forgot and didn't even set my lineup.
And if you're like Brian, who happens to be in maybe a state like Nevada that doesn't allow this stuff, make sure you set your Grid Rivals picks before you go to Vegas, so you don't get goose egged either.
I had an issue with that this season.
That's one of my things. Is I would recommend, if you you want to get a little more exposure next year, find all the sports books that you can get access to, because especially with stuff like matchups or top 10s, there's going to be wild variation. There's going to be some books that have matchups, some that don't. So get yourself exposure, and then find ways with things like Grid Rivals to just have unique ways to attack it. Underdog pick'ems.
I forgot they did that too.
Picks does some stuff. So, find ways to get exposure. You don't necessarily need, like, if you're like, I don't have access. You're like Brian and I are in California. They don't necessarily have access to sports books. Things like Prize Picks and Underdog and Grid Rivals are a fun way to get a little action down on a Sunday and make the race even more fun. And we're going to try and work that in. So if that's something you'd like to see, like Underdog pick'ems or
let us know for sure.
Let us know down in the comments. We can definitely, we're gonna work on cleaning up our content strategy and tweaking that for next year. So anything like that you want to see, definitely let us know. That being said, let's look at the betting card, which was frustrating because I feel like both of us had a really good day, but the stuff that we ended up falling onto at the end didn't necessarily make our betting card. Logano not being a top 10 car was annoying. Briscoe, I mean, I feel like a dummy for falling for that. Almirola was there and then he wasn't.
I told you were going to ride that alone.
Can we talk about Christopher Buescher? Because he felt like a non-factor even into Martinsville, and then all of a sudden he looks like I don't want to say call everyone a rocket ship, but he was
he was
fast. He was flying through the field. He was passing cars. He was, even when he gets stuck back in traffic because of a bad pit stop or something, right back to the front. Like, he was amazing. And I'm really curious to see as we go into next year, another year with RFK, what him and Brad look like. Because obviously there was points, with super speedways where they were both popping really, really amazingly. There was kind of that middle section where he got all his wins and obviously racked up those points.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see if he can at least maintain or maybe take a little step forward next year and continue to get better, or if this was kind of a blip year and he kind of falls back into like the Michael McDowell, Chase Briscoe section of the betting board. So and then so Briscoe over KFB. Go ahead.
I was just going to add on the Buescher thing, like, it was difficult with him coming down the stretch run because you didn't know how they were going to unload. And then there were also times where they didn't unload well, but race day came and somehow or another they found something, or vice versa. Like, they looked good in practice and then they absolutely looked like dumpster fire on Sunday.
Yeah.
So, obviously I'm looking for a little more consistency going into next season, but the stock price is definitely going up on that team, and especially Buescher, who has proven a lot during the 2023 season that he's good on numerous skills.
Yeah. I'm excited to see. They're one of the teams I'm going to keep an eye on. I'm also interested to see just like if there's any other driver movement or if we're all settled. I think there's a few teams that could potentially make some decisions if they really want to get aggressive. It might be maybe a season away.
We're still waiting on the official announcement of the 10 car. So, a lot of
Seems
speculation.
like it's going to be Jackson, but who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Obviously not the day I was looking for with my betting card. Similar red marks for you on some of these. Obviously, fading Chastain in a match.
That was pre-practice. I was like, oh yeah, no, I think Gibbs, because coming into this week, like, Trackhouse had basically checked out. That's what it looked like. And then post-practice, let me tell you, I was all in on Chastain. I actually got that same matchup, but the opposite way in Vegas at -130, and I bet the shit out of that. So yeah, when I was in Sin City, I was very heavy on Ross, and I walked away about 6 to 7 Benjamins up. Like, for me, that's a great weekend because I'm not a huge bettor. Like, we're doing smaller unit plays, but it definitely paid for my weekend plus my next two probably.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I want to work on for next year is I feel like we got a little too over our skis too early, and we were pot committed at that point.
Look, before we come back on our next show, both Kyle and I have been kind of busy since the race, but before we come back on our next show, I'm going to go over pretty much our entire season's worth of bets, and I want to see what percentage of our L's came from the super speedways. And if you remove basically all of that to see where we're at, and then obviously I think it's important for us to actually break down, like, there are some weeks where we went really heavy just based on value, or, which market are we more equipped to attack, like whether it's top 10s, top 5s, matchups, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah.
And it's a matter of like just getting better as better. So figuring out ways to attack the board differently, not get so pot committed early, not, maybe trim down the betting card a little bit. Obviously, it's fun and we like to spray the board and do all kinds of stuff, but ultimately, maybe there's a way we can kind of clean up. And listening to Chris Wormy and listening to Derek Yoder and listening to so many smart people in the NASCAR betting community, just make us better each and every week. So we're getting better. We're being more efficient bettors, and we're finding ways to kind of clean up all of that. Let's look at our season bets and talk about that, because I think that was indicative of kind of where we were, and then how we
Yep.
want to apply into next year. So I think I want to be a little more. I think I want to find a couple names early, and then I want to be more open to checking that market in terms of championship futures
Yeah,
throughout the
on a
season.
consistent basis, I think.
I feel like that was one of those things that we like, because it's so easy, especially when you want to focus all your bets on like weekly races, to kind of not look at that at all. But there was value. People got, like I said, people got Ryan Blaney at 40-1, 35-1. There was value on a lot of these guys. That Kyle Larson was 7.5 or 8-1 at a couple points. Like there's ways to get access, and I know it
Yeah,
sucks to put these bets down and have it sit in your account for 6
I
months.
absolutely hate it.
But when you get to cash that ticket, or you get to cash
Yeah.
a couple versions of that ticket, maybe you get a guy at 20 and then it goes up a little bit and you still believe, you get 30, and then by the season's end he's 13-1. Like, it was pretty impressive to see.
Yeah, and I do think it's when you look at our championship futures, neither of us hit on somebody that we bet preseason. Obviously, I did add the Blaney 14-1. I believe that was like shortly before Martinsville. Probably it was like
Yeah.
a day or two before Martinsville. So happy to cash that. But again, it kind of shows where our heads were at coming into the year, who we thought would be good, who we didn't. Clearly, Chase Briscoe to me is the most disappointing driver of the season, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
After the way he finished 2022, and then I'm very happy being right on Joey Logano not coming anywhere near
Yeah.
3.5 victories.
Yeah. I agree. I'm curious to see if we get regression from a Chris Buescher like we saw with Briscoe. I'm wondering what Hamlin and Truex are going to look like.
Well,
Tyler
honestly,
Reddick.
I'm excited to see how many wins the book set for William Byron.
Uh-huh.
Now, Byron was great this year, but when you look back on his season, a couple of his wins came simply because they got a late race restart. It wasn't him having the best car, driving up to the front and running away from the pack. He just was the best car on pit road, and they would always put themselves in position at the end there to come away with these victories. And you cannot expect that to happen,
Yeah.
multiple years in a row. And to me, I look at that in the same way that people were looking at the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL last year, who were like 10-1 or something in one score games or some garbage. And they knew regression to the mean was going to happen.
Yep.
And this year, I think they have one win, which was this last weekend in similar situations out of like 5. So, it's bound to happen. And if the book set his number at like 5 or 5.5, I would definitely lean the under.
My guess is it's going to be 3.5 or 4, like Logano. And at that point, it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see what they do with Buescher's line, because obviously he won a few races. Michigan was a questionable win. Richmond was a questionable win. Obviously, he ended up being one of the better cars, but a few things had to go right for him to find victory lane. So, yeah, there's a few lines. I'm really excited to see what they do. Obviously, post holidays is when we'll probably get that. I'm also curious to see what 2311 looks like in general, but I think getting a portfolio of good values, where if we can hit a few, we'll be really happy to have. So I think like getting in on Bowman was stupid, obviously, given where he's at. Bowman and Chase Elliott are two that I'm very curious. Obviously, they had it's amazing that Bowman and Elliott and then Byron and Larson are all in the same team. Because it looks like, because Byron and Larson like had all the luck, found all these wins, bounced into wins, and then Bowman and Elliott just had the seasons from hell, obviously with injuries and stuff, and getting suspended for Chase.
I was just gonna say, like the injury part, you can never predict that. And if we're sticking on the thing of like uncertainty going into the next year. What about a guy like Kyle Busch, who early in the season and about halfway through, people thought he was the favorite to win the championship, and then all of a sudden he disappeared over the last like month plus, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So, what's going to be the expectation next year in his second year with RCR? Are we going to see them actually get better, or is that just kind of that team? Like,
Yeah, consistency is going to be their biggest thing. Like, can you be better week in and week out and not be like a complete crapshoot? Because like they showed up to some tracks with tons of speed and they were competitive. Other tracks they'd show up and they were non-factors.
Yep.
And when you want to be a legit team, you want to be a playoff driver, you have to be better than that. And I know he got a few wins, and obviously there's certain tracks where he can do well, but even when we went back to some of those tracks, he was a non-factor. If he was 17th in qualifying and kind of got stuck in the traffic, he wasn't going anywhere. He was sitting there. And then obviously Austin Dillon, like, people want to project Austin Dillon into this and that, and I don't know if that's ever going to be the case. Like, he's a super speedway racer. He pops it a couple times, but
he's a prohibitive 9th through 12th guy. Like,
I mean, I think he would love to be a top 10-ish car every week. I don't even think he's that most of the time.
well, that's on like that's his cap. That's his ceiling. Is
Yeah, if he gets a top 10, it's like an amazing week. And
but his top 10 isn't even like a oh yeah, no, he easily got inside the top 10. It's like, shit, he needed a last lap pass to actually get that 10th place finish.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to see that. Yeah. There's a bunch of people I'm excited, and I think it's going to be interesting because obviously only 16 drivers can make the playoffs. So obviously with Harvick retiring, we'll see what that means. But there's only so many spots. There's young drivers that we're excited about. What can Ty Gibbs do in a second full year?
I was just gonna say, I feel like Gibbs to me, he's somebody that I got my eye on for like playoff futures, or like how we did the championship 4 futures when we previewed the season. Like, I'm interested to see what his numbers are, what his win totals are, matchup win totals, because I do think that car, they showed a lot of speed at a lot of tracks this year. And if they could just improve on Sundays, like, we're looking at a guy who could easily get into the playoffs if they match the expectations and the talent.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I'm looking back at the playoff standings. Ryan Blaney was 9th in the original 16. And I mean, he was on the outside looking in. Obviously, getting wins at Martinsville helped kind of push him across. But it's amazing how like thin that margin is. Where if you just have the wrong race the wrong week, it could be a long season. So, but we will look at your futures card because obviously you had some wins. So getting Blaney at 14-1 was really nice. So obviously you put in what? 1, 2, like 3 units.
Small on the championship.
Yeah, but that's how you do it. Like, oh, here it is. Yeah. It's like 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units total, and you win 14 units. Like, that's how you do it. And obviously, when you have a Blaney at 14, it's a lot easier to go a little heavier. When you take and I think that is going to be our biggest thing going into next year. As enticing and as appealing as these 30 and 40 and 50-1 odds are,
exactly,
they're good. But I think because of the way the year was not in 2022, where there was so much variety, we even talked about it. Like, we expected a lot more consistency this year, but we didn't necessarily put that into our betting card. So I think that's something.
Well, we swung for the fences with those long odds.
Don't be afraid to hone in on the top of the board. Don't be grossed out by 4-1. There's a reason why they're priced that way.
And I don't know. That's gross.
Yeah, but like, if they're the best car, or if you don't love, like, this is the thing that I think we got bet the best at, is we saw a 4-1 or a 5-1, and we're like, in terms of outrights, don't love that. But how can I get exposure to that driver?
Yep, exactly.
Is there matchups? Is there top Chevy, top Ford, top Toyota that I can get? Because like, we got Byron when he was like 5-1 to win the race at plus 350 to top Chevy. And that was a great bet. That's a way to get exposure. not necessarily needing the win, but just
Yeah,
to be
you
the best.
mitigate your risk that way too.
So I think continually getting better that way will make us such better bettors.
Yeah, and so
year.
on that topic, I think it's really important for everybody to take note and remember for next year's championship race, as long as the books don't make this adjustment, it makes almost no sense to bet any of the championship 4 drivers to actually win the race anymore when books are offering a group bet of the championship 4 guys, because essentially if all 4 of them wreck out, if your guy's the last man standing, you can still win, you could still cash that. And, perfect example of that was I was sitting at Westgate 10 minutes before the race started, and I got Ryan Blaney at plus 295 to win the group of the championship 4 guys, when in the outright market, he was 3-1.
Yeah.
And because think about that little 5-cent difference.
And he was probably like 2-1 to win the championship.
Yeah, exactly. And the plus 295, I had all the possibilities in the world. I didn't need him to win. I didn't need him to finish top 5. All he had to do was finish ahead of the rest of the championship 4 guys, which wound up happening. Yeah. And I only lost a nickel on the actual odds.
And, this is the first year that a non-championship driver won a race. So it doesn't mean that it's going to happen every year.
But the books might have to adjust the odds next year,
too. If the prices are basically the same, and you can have a little more flexibility, take it.
Yeah.
So Blaney over Logano was great. Hamlin over 2.5 wins. That was a nice call on your part. He obviously had a great season. This is the second year in a row where he was right there for the championship 4 and just couldn't get it done. And it was interesting too, because Phoenix isn't really a great track for him. So Phoenix is interesting because there are certain drivers that are amazing at it, and then other ones that are not so great. So even if you have the amazing season, you do all the stuff, you get to Phoenix, you're in the championship 4, you got to beat 3 other drivers, potentially a Ryan Blaney, who in the last 2 years has been one of, if not the best car, Kyle Larson, who's been dominant at this track, William Byron, who obviously can win. Like, there's so many cars that really, really do well here, where if you're a Hamlin or something else, it's like you're still climbing uphill no matter how good your season was. So it is kind of interesting to think about.
It also comes down to the speed of the car, though, too, just because, you saw it with Christopher Bell's car, for instance, where, him and Blaney qualified poorly, but both of them were working their way through the field, and they were going to be up there racing with the championship guys. And, a guy like Blaney or a guy like Hamlin, who of late, Phoenix isn't necessarily his best type of track, but if we get a late restart and it's him versus Larson, like we've seen it before, Denny is unafraid to put the bumper to somebody or put the door on somebody when it comes to this situation. And I mean, to me, I think that's all you're asking for, is something of that nature. Like, obviously I almost feel like the fairest type of thing for a championship race would basically just to say, okay, F it, we're going to Daytona. Like, everybody has equal chance to wreck out or
and
win.
That's how Austin Dillon wins the championship. No, I think we need to do like I think a Homestead championship would be interesting, or Kansas.
Yeah, I was going to say like a mile and a half. I think levels the playing field a little bit more, because it takes, I don't know. I don't want to say it takes skill out of it a little bit, because Phoenix is a lot more like tire management, all that type of stuff, and getting the line, and whereas mile and a half are speed based.
Maybe you roll the playoffs back like 2 more weeks, and then you have a 3-week championship where you have a short track, an intermediate, and then maybe a road course, and then that's a truer test of how good you were all season.
But but I hear that argument, but okay, picture this scenario. Say the first race, you have 2 of the 4 championship drivers are involved in the first wreck, and they finished 35 and 35th and 36th. Yeah. And say the other 2 guys, they finished 2nd and 3rd. Those last 2 guys are essentially completely knocked out of the championship picture unless they win one of the next 2 races, which is, likely, or they have a good shot at that, being a championship driver. But to me, that creates more possibilities of taking the fairness out of a championship like round
I wonder,
than
like,
just one race.
William Byron, if he was in a Final Four like that, he was the king of being like third or fifth all year. Like, he was never the best car in a lot of races,
Yeah,
but he was always right there. And like, do you want to award consistency even if it's not peak versus what
exactly.
Blaney
Or
did?
a win, like
Yeah.
or like obviously
Yeah.
Blaney didn't win, but he
But
could.
he
He
was the
honestly,
best car by a lot, and
yeah, he was the
Ross
best
had
car
happened to
among
have
the
a
championship
rocket ship,
guys,
and he ran
and
away
it
with
wasn't
the race.
close. Yeah.
All right. Well, that sums up our betting card. That sums up our race review. We'll kind of roll it forward and think about next year. I think we've talked about a lot of drivers, but Brian, is there obviously right now as we sit here, is there one driver friend of mine that you're like, I'm really excited to see how they perform? I'm really excited to see about potentially getting in on some futures. I'm really excited to see what 2024 is going to look like. Is there a name that you think could take a step forward or just be more consistent or anything like that?
So there's two names. They drive for the same team. I am a stan for this team, and they've monopolized the market in paint schemes, and that's the 2311 Garage. Look, Tyler Reddick, he's going to be great next year. I fully expect them to be competing for a championship 4 spot, and the price is going to be right with Bubba in champ 4 markets, in playoff markets, in win markets, because all he did this year was completely silence the critics that said, oh, he couldn't make the playoffs. He couldn't advance in the playoffs. He was not good at these tracks. And, top 10 after top 10 at tracks where people are like, oh yeah, no, that's not happening. Shit, he just did it at Phoenix where his career average finish is like 19th or something. Like his trajectory is on like a 90-degree angle right now in terms of how good he's getting. And this team is only going to start funneling more funds and more resources into it with Denny Hamlin, who clearly wants them to be successful. And they have freaking Michael Jordan. So I think those two guys to me are the most interesting going into 2024. And I think both are going to take, another step up in what the expectations are going to be.
And I'm really curious to see, obviously probably not next year, but I think in 2 years, them having a third car. I think that seems very real. Them and Trackhouse. I think SVG or somebody could be, and maybe SVG takes over, Suarez's spot. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. There's some drivers that'll be interesting. Obviously, Harvick's retiring. Josh Berry. I'm curious to see what a full season of him with SHR. SHR is a team that I'm interested in. Obviously, Almirola is retiring. They haven't officially announced it. Seems like it's going to be Gregson.
Chase Briscoe is now the old man in the
Josh Berry is taking over for Kevin Harvick. Are they going to become a middling team that kind of fades and is that team that we saw in the beginning, or can they find speed and be more reliable week to week? What do we make of Colleague? Justin Haley going to Rick Ware, AJ Allmendinger going to Xfinity. Although there's a little more, I don't know, something going on there. Hemrick will be taking over Justin Haley's ride. John Hunter Nemechek's going to make a step up. That'll be interesting to see, taking over the 42.
And then we got what's his name? Hocevar jumping in the 77 for Spire.
Yep. And then front row is officially McDowell and Gilliland. So it'll be good for Gilliland to not have to go to the Rick Ware car and then to be here and then to be there. And then,
that was a disaster.
So we'll see what that means. And then Spire is going to have a third car with Zane Smith. So what does Zane Smith look like in the Cup Series? There's a few things that I'm interested to see how that kind of funnels. Are they going
to do a farewell tour for Martin Truex Jr. next year if he decides to say at the beginning of the season he's calling it quits? Like,
yeah, I think there's a few guys that are kind of trending that way, and we'll see, how they want to approach it, and if they want like a Kevin Harvick see ya tour, or if they want to just, I'm done.
I can see Martin Truex Jr. just like the last race of the year, championship race. He goes, you know what? I'm retiring. Catch me at the lake. I'll be fishing or something.
I mean, the way this season ended, he was clearly really annoyed. I'm curious to see if
Yeah.
he has a new crew chief next year.
Good
There was
point.
clearly a lot of frustration with him and James Small. What does that look like? Is there someone? Does James Small go take over for another driver and kind of help them level up a little bit? Very interested to see what Ty Gibbs looks like in year 2 in a full ride. Can he elevate to being like a more week in and week out guy?
Yeah.
Or does he take a step back and being like, he
Like
flashed a
Austin
lot?
Cindric did.
Does Austin Cindric even end up in the Cup Series
I
in
was
2
just gonna
years?
say, is Austin Cindric the first guy demoted next year?
I think because of the family name, he's probably locked in for a little while. Or is he a guy that, despite all the struggles this year, all of a sudden flashes and shows some of that talent? Because he's a guy at super speedways and road courses that should be pretty good
Yeah.
every time, and he was just not. And he's in a good Penske car. Like, there's zero reason for him to have some of the struggles he had. There's a lot of interesting questions. If you have,
Dude, I'm already ready for
I
2024.
know, me too. Let's load it up. Let's get it going. If you have any drivers that you're really excited about, that you think could take steps forward, drop them in the comments. Once again, if you want to see something else from this podcast, if there's things that you like, things that you didn't like, things that you think would make the show better, let us know down below. You can also reach out to us, like Brian said, on Twitter, Brian_Twining. I'm at Notorious KRO. We're starting to kind of figure those things out and kind of get the ball rolling, because Brian and I are already excited about 2024. We're going to take a little bit of a break here, but
Yeah.
when odds drop, when new stuff drops, we'll be here to talk about it. If something crazy happens with driver seats and all that good stuff, we'll be here to talk about that. I think that's all I have. Brian, is there anything else before we get out of here and we call it a day?
Yeah, no, I'm 2023'd out. I'm probably I'm heading out of the country here this weekend. I'm going to Aruba, so I will be celebrating the Ryan Blaney Championship in the best way I know, and I will be by the pool with multiple drinks, enjoying my time away.
Brian may or may not come back. We'll keep an eye on that. We really appreciate everybody who's liked, who's subscribed, who's watched our video, who's shared it around on social media, who's interacted with us. It really does mean a lot to us. Appreciate everyone who has been along for the ride. That's Brian Twining. I'm Kyle Robert. Enjoy the rest of your 2023. We'll see you in 2024 with a new NASCAR schedule.